What's up, everybody? Big Hurt 916, getting down with Fresh Out. You know how we do it over here. I got a special show for you today. A man that was wrongfully convicted, my man Joseph Gentile. He's from the East Coast. He's got a hell of a story. We also have here a very prominent, works with the Innocent Program, Mr. Ed Dowd. He's joined us and he's going to share some insight. This man has a lot of knowledge. So, you guys, hey, this is a serious one. Stay tuned, get your pens and papers if you want to take notes, and we're going to get into it. So, Joseph, let's talk about a little bit like what led up to your arrest and how your connection with Mr. Dowd came about.
Okay, it was what led up to my arrest. July 29, 2005. I was at my house in Astoria, Queens, New York, and I received a phone call from my then fiancee, Diane. We'll have to call her Diane. That's not her lawful name, but Diane called me and said she was pregnant. And we had been estranged for about 2 weeks. So I was 29 going on 30 years old. She was 24 years old. I worked in the music business at the time. Everyone from Prodigy, God bless him, may rest in peace, to Black Child from Murder Inc. And did security initially work for them. But the bottom line is, so I was always busy. 2 weeks go by, she calls me, she's pregnant, and she wanted to come by. I was happy, Big Herc. I was ecstatic. I was looking forward to being a father. And about 15 minutes later, she calls me. She was from the Bronx and said that while she was leaving her house to get in a vehicle and come see me with her younger brother, we'll call him Brian, men were trying to talk to her, flirt with her, and she was telling them, leave me alone. This is what she told me. And when they wouldn't listen, her younger brother, he was very big for his age at 15, heavy set, stepped in front of her, and according to her, one of them pulled out a 38 caliber handgun. So, I'm in Queens, New York. On a good day with no traffic, Herc, it's at least 50 minutes with no traffic. You got traffic, you're definitely going to be an hour and a half. So my first response was, listen, honey, I can't get there immediately. You call the police. I knew her uncle was a detective at the New York City Police Department. I believe it was the 106. She had a brother-in-law and a cousin that also were NYPD, one in the Brooklyn precinct, one in the Queens precinct. The uncle was a detective in the Queens precinct as well. So Queens, New York. So the bottom line is, I'm like, she's always had PBA cards. In New York City, a PBA cards, the Police Benevolent Association. You kind of get pulled over, you're going a little over speed limit, they see it, they're going to give you, a little slap on the wrist maybe instead of a ticket. So first thing I said was like, did you call 911? I mean, they pulled a gun on you. She's like, yeah, Joey, I called 911, but they came outside. Allegedly, according to her, they were hustling dope and crack on the block, which I believed. I had dropped her to mom's house before, and she said they patted them down, couldn't find a firearm, and the police left, and now they're still in front of my house. I'm scared to leave. So I said, all right, I said, I'm going to come to the block. Don't come outside the house. I did security. There's some other things, and I'm glad for fact checkers, Big Herc, because certain friends of mine, for example, when John Gotti Jr. went to trial in 2008, I was taken from the state custody. I was upstate correctional box at the time. I was taken from there by federal authorities on a federal writ and brought into MDC in Brooklyn. My bunkie was Mikey the Butcher Vitruso. I don't know if he's still living. I've lost contact with him. God bless Mikey. But just to give a little bit of a background, most jurists can't understand, especially the further you go back, that times were different in New York, just about everywhere, but especially in New York in certain respects. There was Detective Adam Ramos, Organized Crime Task Force, stationed at the 114. Anti-crime Officer Jerry White. There was a few other officers that worked at 114 precinct. When they had problems in their life that their badge couldn't solve, they'd call me. I wasn't a rat, didn't cooperate, was no snitch. I grew up with some guys. I can name some names: Joseph Costanza, Larry Carrito. If you hear this, you know me growing up. I would never harm a woman. But the bottom line is, they would call me. So now she's calling me, telling me this. A juror, Herc, really can't acknowledge, the male or female jurors, somebody like a movie getting in a car, arming themselves, and confronting quote-unquote bad guys. You pull a gun on a girl, in my book, you're a bad guy. You rape a woman, you're a bad guy. You're a pedophile, you're a bad guy. So I'm like, look, I'm terrible to this day outside of Queens driving. So I call a cab. I had 3 cars at the time. I called a local cab service before Uber or Lyft existed. This was, again, July 29, 2005. I grabbed my 18-inch barrel Winchester Defender. And the only thing I said during trial, we're way past perjury time. They got 18 years of my life, Herc, was I did have a 45 caliber 1911 firearm. And in any event, I arm myself, I get in the cab. On the way to my cab, I see a kid from the neighborhood, Peter DiPignano. And I hope he's doing well. I haven't seen Peter, good kid. We get in the cab, we head out to the Bronx. She's calling the cab driver, giving the cab driver directions because he wasn't familiar outside the Bronx. She described 13 to 15 men outside her house. So when we pull in front of our house, as we come down the block, there's like 15 guys, maybe 16 and 17. I didn't count. This was not a yellow cab. This is what we used to call like a livery cab or a non-official cab that was commonly used in New York City. So narcotics divisions in the five boroughs used to use these unmarked vehicles that could look like your grandmother's car. We pull up, I jump out with my gun drawn, and I yell at all these young men in front of the house. They were between the ages of 18 and 25. Then there was one older gentleman sitting on the trunk of a car, Big Herc, an older Jamaican brother, probably Rasta. I'll never forget him for a reason. I'll explain. I jump out. I have my firearm out, and I start giving commands. Hands in the motherfucker, lift your hands. So these young gentlemen froze. They all lift their hands. Then I start screaming the command, left hand, lift shirt. Your left hand, lift shirt. Most people are right-handed. I figured, so they lift their hand, they lift their shirts up. I see no firearms. They're listening to everything except for the one guy in the trunk. So I turned to him and I used a profanity. I said, Mother effer, you didn't hear what I said? And he turned around and he said with the coolest patois, easy, brethren. Obviously, you know Popo. I had a white gold Rolex on. My shoes were very expensive shoes. The clothes I wear, you could tell I wasn't a cop. And I said, fair enough, Dred. I said, check this out. The mother, he said, what's the problem? We'll straighten it out. So I put my firearm down and I said, listen, the future mother of my children, her family lives here. Someone tried to talk to her. She keeps having problems on the block. She's always telling me about it. I tell her, leave them alone. Just ignore them. And this time she's saying someone pulled a firearm on her and her little brother, and she's pregnant with my child. So I said, this time I'm coming like a gentleman. My exact words were, next time I come, stolen car, ski mask, and lick shot. And his response was basically, I'm going to come next time and start shooting in plain English. And he said, yo, tell her to come outside, and I'm going to, we're going to straighten this out. This is my block. There'll be no more problems with her. We call her outside. She comes outside. She looked very surprised. Her sister came out. She came out. Her brother came out. Comes down off their front porch, shakes hands with neighbors. They're smiling at her now. She's kissing on me. Let's go. We're gonna go back to my house. We get in the cab. She began kissing on me, her. But the 2 weeks we were apart, she was very she was a passionate woman. Is the best way I'm gonna put it with
So
respect.
hold on. What happened then when the guys came out? What happened with the whole street scene?
Oh, the street scene, they all showed love and respect. I didn't come playing around. I
No,
wasn't
but I'm
playing.
saying you said the Jamaican guy was going to squash everything.
Yeah, he did. Once she came out and he said, this is her. I said, yeah. He just was telling them all, you see her face. He made sure that all of them, and they did. They showed respect. Even some females came out of the house, girls that she had ongoing beefs with. She was I don't even want to say her ethnicity was West Indian. She was very light brown skin. So some of the darker skinned sisters on the block, she had pin straight hair. Things came out there later on, I wish her nothing but the best. So I don't want to say anything derogatory or ill about her. But I was with her because I've always been attracted to women of color. That's just always been my preference, and never been. And anybody say I'm lying. Anybody that sees this podcast that knew me growing up, I've never been a strip club guy. I've never been looking at this or that type of guy. I'm the guy on the street that if I'm with 10 dudes and one of those guys starts talking crazy to a group of women, I'll be the first one to tell them back then, I'm a lot calmer than I used to be, Big Herc. I was a very aggressive man as a young man. And when need be, with men, not with women or children. And if I'm with a group of men and some man starts, that's in my group, hooting and hollering at a girl, depending, no matter where I'm at, Queensbridge Projects, or I'm in Howard Beach, or I'm in Astoria, if they talk crazy in Italian back in the days, in the 80s and 90s,
So
I'm sorry, Hulk, yeah. So we get in the vehicle, we get in the cab, we get back to my residence, and we started kissing. I really wanted to ask her questions. I'm a faithful man when I'm with somebody. So my whole thing is like, I wanted to know, I wanted to ask questions. Some men are not like that, that's them. But I want to know where you were, what were you doing for 2 weeks? I know you're a very passionate woman, so I just didn't want to go into no type of physical passionate thing right there. I wanted to know what's going on. I'm a man though. She starts pulling me towards the laundry room. She kisses on me. We made love. Um, when we were done, at the end, I had seen something that looked like a hickey to me. So right away, it hurt my heart. I hadn't put a hickey on a girl since fourth grade, Big Herc. I went in the shower. She went in the living room. And when I came out of my shower and I come to the kitchen, she's on her phone. So I kind of walked around quietly, tiptoed, and when I got close, she began erasing or deleting things in her phone. And I said, "Baby girl, you cheating with somebody on the block? What's going on?" And she said no. She said no, but she had like kind of a smirk on. I didn't put hands on her, but I verbally lost it. The first thing that came to my heart and mind was, um, this really happened on your block? Man threatened your life with a gun. Why didn't you call him, whoever he is? So I was hurt. You know what I'm saying? I was definitely hurt. Did I care about her? I loved her. Loved her to in my heart. So, that was the first thing. I ranted and raved, calling her some bad names. I was hurt. Like I said, Big Herb. Didn't put a hand on her. I just leave the room. I remember to the best of my ability, she gets on her cell phone. I tell her, call someone to come pick you up. I'm not even giving you cash fare. I just want you to leave. Just please get out of my house. And I end up waiting. There's a knock at the door. It's NYPD. So I had an American staff, I had a red nose, and I had a Jeep. They were pitties, but they were babies. These dogs, they were in the house dogs. They weren't fight dogs. So, I told them, nevertheless, told the officers, wait on the porch. Let me put my dogs in the basement. I don't want to get my dogs shot. So I figured she called 911. But later on, it comes out at trial that some of the truth that she told, she called her sister. Okay. So her sister calls the police from the Bronx. I go out on the front porch. One of the officers asked me, what's going on? We got to report domestic violence. And I said, look, I didn't hit her. She didn't hit me. We're screaming. They bring her out in the front yard. I'm still calling her bad names. And if she sees this, I do apologize. On some grown man mature stuff, I really do. I was hurt like a little boy. So she's kind of saying I'm sorry, and I'm just like writing it off, like, get your stuff, get out, get your stuff, get out. I don't want you in my house anymore. So she had like an overnight bag. She had some possessions there. And in any event, so she's on the way to the car. There was a woman. She actually is very still mainstream. And she was part of one of the stars of Love and Hip Hop. And that was the girl I was seeing before her. And best way to say is we spent time together. So as she's walking, I told her, look, her family's in a job. I told one of the officers, I believe it was Officer McCluskey. I said, Sergeant Favors. I said, Sergeant Favors, her family's in a job. I don't want to give her care fare. She broke my heart. Drive her to the precinct. I'm done. And I walked in my house. I had tears in my eyes. I was hurt. So I went in the house. Now about 2 week time frames goes by, and then I get a phone call from a detective Adam Ramos, and I had known Detective Ramos, like I said earlier, from the neighborhood, and the only one time he ever came and asked for my help, and he asked me to go to friends of mine. This was actually in the Daily News in 2002 in New York City, how a suspected terrorist had planned on poisoning the drug supply, the cocaine of New York City. So Detective Ramos came to me and he said, "Just call me Joey Fingers." I don't use that name anymore. Brother Joseph is fine. He comes to me and asks questions, and I went to people that may know. Never told on a friend, but to get information. This is what he told me. I mean, if he wants to pop up and he wants to verify it or confirm it, he said the FBI was asking these questions and knew I knew people. So I brought that. So he calls me out of the blue. So I need you to come down to the precinct. I said, for what? He said, something with your girlfriend. I said, bro, I don't have a girlfriend. Her and I broke up. He said, no, no, no. He said, my boss from Police Plaza 1, he was an intelligence detective, organized crime task force. He said, my boss from PP1, Police Plaza 1, which is headquarters for NYPD, is coming to the 114th, and Internal Affairs Bureau is coming to the 114th. I said, for what? He wasn't on, there was no illegal thing going on between me and guys that worked at the 114. I grew up with some of them. I used to appear at the PAL sometimes, I teach the kids a little bit what I knew how to box, a little bit of martial arts type things. So I mean, when he's saying IAB's coming, I'm like, for what? He goes, I don't know. I'll call you later. This has got to be August 1st. So this is about 3-4 days later. I go to a place called El Forno Italia in Astoria, Queens for dinner, Big Herc. I sit down, I order my food. About 20 minutes later, I get a call again from Detective Adam Ramos. and just call him Ray. I said, "What's up, Ray?" He said, "Listen, Mr. Gentile, I may need you to come down. I wasn't Fingers no more. I wasn't Joey, Mr. Gentile. Mr. Gentile, I may need you to come down to the precinct." I said, "For what?" But he's being extremely formal, where he's normally informal. So I'm like, "For what?" He's like, "We found a body in a van and it's got tattoos, something crazy like that, and he's dead, or whatever. So maybe you could identify him from his tat." I said, "What? What are you talking about?" I said, "All right, Detective Ramos, give me a call when you need me to come down." I took that as, let me call a lawyer. I called my lawyer then, who's now retired, Louis Michael Reese. And he says, "Joe, whatever it is, call me back. Call me if you get arrested or whatever. We'll go down to the precinct. We'll check it out tomorrow." 15 minutes later, I get a phone call. It's again, Detective Adam Ramos and Mr. Gentile, we've surrounded your home. They came with SWAT teams, helicopters, shut down the block. Told me, we surrounded your home. Come outside. I said, "Listen, Detective Ramos, I'm not home. I'm out having dinner. I'm going to come down to the precinct with my attorney in the morning and surrender myself, but I want to know what's going on." And I said, "I'm going to send a friend of mine, good kid from the neighborhood, Peter DePignano, again, who I trusted. So my dogs, he can hear I'm going to send him to my house to get my dogs out. You guys can search the house. I'm not there." So I send Pete. In a nutshell, I find out what happens the next morning from Pete's mom calls my phone before I go to surrender myself. Pete's mom picks up, says, "Joe, they arrested Pete. They wouldn't let him in the house, so SWAT storms my house. They shoot and murder my dogs. One of them was pregnant, a female, a red nose, and they shot up the dogs." And I call Pete's mom. Pete's mom says, "Joe, they arrested Pete for kidnapping and rape." I said, "What?" Like, "Yeah, he's the one that took the ride with me to the Bronx." I said, "Kidnapping and rape? Are you serious?" She's like, "Yeah." So I called Mr. Reese. I said, "Look, I'm gonna get cleaned up and I'm gonna come meet with you in Kew Gardens, Queens. It's a little distance from Astoria, and then we'll go surrender ourselves at the Queens DA because they're shooting up dogs and everything else. God only knows what's going on, And this is what Peter got arrested for." He said, "Joe, get up a couple 100,000 for bail at the least. You're gonna need that for bail." When all said and done, I have a friend of mine, Lionel Cooper, Godfather Part 3, infamous Mob Deep. He comes by my friend's apartment, who I went to after I left El Forno, Italia, my man Tone, Historia Warrior. So I go to his apartment. He comes by, a rapper named Big Noid, who was a friend. He comes by. I said, "Yo, Lionel, do me a favor, Gio. Go to the store and get me this soap and stuff. I don't want to use Tone's products, and I'm going to go with my lawyer." He goes to this local spies to go to, picks up these things, comes back. They followed him. They were listening on my phone. Of course, at trial, they said they got a tip that I use a specific kind of soap, which was ridiculous. They did it. They got a little tap on my phone. Followed him back. I told the lady there, put it on my tab. It was called the Face and Body Shop. The lady named Eve owned it. So I said, "Eve, I'm sending a friend of mine. He's brown skin. He's going to come by. He's going to pick these things up." She said, "No problem." When all said and done, they follow him back. SWAT kicks in Tone's door. They cuff me. They arrest myself, Godfather Part 3 and Tone, and put us through the system. And when I get to 114 precinct, they tell me I'm being arrested for rape in the first degree, assault, kidnapping in the second degree or first degree, assault in the second degree. And the exact words of the detective that was in charge of my case, Big Irk, he turned to me when he told me I was being arrested for. He wrote it on a piece of paper first, pushed it in front of me. I looked at the paper. I said, "You serious?" His exact words, "God is my witness." Or in Arabic, Allah's my shahid. He said, "Joe, she sets you up real good. IAB was in here." I said, "Okay." So to fast forward, I don't want to sit like yourself, Big Herb. I didn't go to the weight pit. I started the bid 230 solid, pressing 325 like it's water. I took myself straight to law library when I endured a trial that was a farce. Any document generated by NYPD wasn't allowed into evidence. Documents that proved she could speak. Documents like the original police report that proved she had no burns, no bruises, was coherent. She even described my firearms that were lawfully purchased at the time. I had no felonies as an adult more accurately more accurately than seasoned veteran detectives, according to my trial prosecutor, and as accurately as the firearms ballistics expert supplied by NYPD, Andrea McCluskey. And in any event, so everything they said at trial basically was a lie. The first day of trial, Big Hurt to turn all the people of color in the jury against me. Ramel Gill, Black Child from Murder Inc. He came. Everybody was, the only two white faces was my father, may he rest in peace, Joseph John Gentile Sr., and my Aunt Marie, Mama Mary, who raised me. Other than that, everybody were people of color. So my lawyer tasked me, and his relevancy was what went on in my trial. So she said, she told the DA she's scared to testify in front of your friends. Please ask your friends to leave. We don't want a hearing because it's going to turn the judge against us. So they can come back tomorrow to show their support for you. So I turned to everybody. They weren't listening to my lawyer. I said, well, guys, break out, come back tomorrow. She's light brown skin, this woman, the alleged victim, my ex-girlfriend. So one of the first things in after all my friends leave, they bring the jury out. Then they bring her out. She gets on the stand. And Big Herb no lie, the entire trial, anytime she was in the courtroom or on the stand, I kept expecting at any moment for her to burst out and say the truth. But before trial, we spoke for 47 minutes on recorded phone calls. And she expressed her desire, to tell the truth, but she was scared of two things: going to prison, and she was scared of an ex-employee of mine, Phil Caruso, and his connections. I was going to leave it at that, and felt that he had more pull than myself. She was in fear, So this is recorded, 47 minutes. Don't take my word for it.
So
Yeah.
what was behind her making up all this story? What was
Well, it came out later, and I was kind of giving in the present time and waiting through, and I went through trial. Everything came out kind of in the rinse. All these factors that at the time at trial, the ADA John Carroll, the late ADA John Carroll, may he rest in peace, said, ladies and gentlemen, jury, why would she lie about all this? And I'm like, damn, I probably broke her heart when I broke off relations, told her we're through. And in all sincerity, I really wasn't. I was trying to put it on timeout in hopes that she would be in fear of losing me, for cheating, and she would stop that. I was on the brink of, and this is part of my motion to fix bail, certified by the Queen's Attorney's Office, not my friends, the Queen's DA. I had a deal with Lionel Roseman of Universal Motown for $1 million up front for my record label. So my whole thing is, I really didn't want to be with a video vixen or a groupie. I wanted a woman who wanted me before I became famous. I'm in a Smack DVD, but that's all neither here nor there. I'm in some other things in hip hop and R&B from 2003 to 2005. Before I became a household name, God willing at the time, like whether 50 Cent or Eminem, I wanted a woman who wanted me for me. So my whole thing was, I really wasn't breaking up with the girl. I really wanted her just not to cheat. It made sense then. As a 50-year-old man now, I know better. It just wasn't meant to be. No hard feelings. But when all said and done, when he said that at trial, like, why would she go through all this? She made an affidavit of withdrawal. They wouldn't allow into evidence. My attorney didn't even try and enter into evidence. She made an affidavit of withdrawal. The DA said in my sentencing and to the New York City Daily News now this is 2005, not 1952. He said to the Daily News, and he said in my sentencing, that he was aware of 47 minutes of recorded phone calls. Okay. At my sentencing, the jury's gone now. I didn't digress when I brought in why they excused all my friends, my supporters at trial, because the first thing out of her mouth during her testimony was, and I'm certain the DA put her up to this, he was a very cunning man. He's deceased, so I don't really. I make it a practice, Big Herc, not to speak bad of the dead, even if there were a trial prosecutor who knew I was innocent. But he said, "What motivations does she have to do this?" He heard the motivations on the phone recordings. He heard the fear that she had of someone who's passed on now. She said this all. But again, the reason I'm bringing that up is at the same time I'm going to trial, there was a famous case in '05 that led into '07 as well. A father and son that the Manhattan DA charged and federal prosecutors were going to charge for human trafficking. They were supplying high-end escorts, older women here in Manhattan from all over the country. They spoke on the phone from Rikers Island. I was on Rikers Island 2 years. And they spoke on the phone. They played that for the jury during trial. All the pre-trial conversations they had, telling women that worked for them, BITCH, the B word, you better bring my commissary money. Talking to the women that they employed, these escorts, like dirt. And the DA played it for the jury. Why wouldn't my trial prosecutor play these phone calls? He waits until I'm wrongfully convicted. My judge, may he rest in peace, ex-trial prosecutor over a decade. Anything that was favorable, he would not allow in evidence. I'm not generated from myself or an investigator that I didn't have.
so you're saying, if I'm following you correct, this woman that was supposed to be pregnant with your child,
Yes, sir.
made up all this stuff and went to trial, said that you hit her and did all this stuff. I mean, kidnapped her.
Burned her with a cigarette. Mm-hmm.
So when did you allegedly do all this stuff in between time that you had seen her? What? How this? How was somebody able to fabricate? When she made up all this and you had no alibi that you weren't? How all this even come about? It doesn't make sense to me.
It doesn't make sense. It's right. They suppressed anything it did. All right, ready? In real time. Here's what really happens now after, again, this is the rinse. They say what doesn't come out in the wash comes out in the rinse. She leaves my house with two police officers. Sergeant Justin Favors, July 2005, the night of, and Officer McCluskey, that they intentionally left out of trial. And Officer McCluskey, if you see this, I know that you and her, I found out later on, were involved in a relationship. This is why during the trial, the prosecutor didn't know who the second officer was, who was just some rookie. They left him out of the trial because phone records would have proved that she began a new relationship with that man the night she left my house while she was in a relationship with myself and then Phil Caruso. When I was locked up, Big Herc, I found out she was dating the same officer that picked up from my home and Mr. Caruso, contrary to her statement to the newspapers when I was wrongfully convicted in 2007. But here's what really happens in real time. I found out later on. She leaves my house that night. And on the way to the car, I tell her I'm getting back with so and so. You know, the girl that I told you about, she still has relevancy in the music industry. She gets down to the precinct now. Went in front of the cops and in front of me. She's saying, you know, oh, he didn't hit me. I didn't hit him. And I'm telling the truth. I didn't hit her. I did spit at the floor and I did use profane words, what they call menacing. I was angry. You had me come to the Bronx and risk my life when you could have called whoever you were cheating with and given your body to, was the way I felt in my heart, to come play the hero, you know, Captain Saver Lady. So, but that's what I was most furious about. But bottom line, she gets in the car and now she starts telling them a different story. I get a phone call from then Officer Jerry White that night. Joe, stay away from her. She's trouble. She's talking about firearms that you have that are not registered. She's saying that allegedly you're racketeering, stealing stores, all kinds of craziness to get you arrested.
Joe, let
I,
me
I
interrupt.
said,
Can I interrupt for a minute?
of course they do,
But
Mr. Dowd.
I know I'm just trying to. The reason why I feel you're wrongfully convicted is that the night of the incident is she claimed nothing. She said you had a domestic violence and they let her go home. They waited a week, and then all of a sudden the story turned into a kidnapping. If that's where this goes afoul. That's where that's the reason when I read the file that there was grounds to believe that you were innocent because
So,
it turns into a he said she said, but she waited a week to change
well,
the story of what happened the night of. The night of, if you kidnapped her the night of, and
mhm.
you had these guns the night of, then
To
you
fill
were
in.
there and ready and able to be arrested then.
Mr. Dowd, being retired law enforcement now for some time, over 2 decades, you were NYPD homicide detective. You saw the original police report. They call it a UF 61 in New York, Big Herc. I'm charged with menacing, which is basically yelling at your spouse or significant other, and I'm charged with assault in the third degree. In the New York State, it's attempted assault or assault without injury. That's the statute for assault in the third degree. Didn't touch her, screamed at her, nothing like that. I mean, I shoved to get away from me when she was saying, Joey, I'm sorry.
Can I ask you a quick question?
Yes, sir.
For this to go this big and have this trial, was there an like she was going to get some type of take over your business? Was there money involved? Was there drugs?
There was definitely money involved.
It
You
has to
see?
be something bigger because I've seen people with domestic violence cases and I've never seen like the police go through this much to cover up something like this unless there's big money involved. There's some type of conspiracy that's being not talked about.
That's what we're gonna get into it real briefly, and I'm not digressing. I'm just speaking facts. Right, ready? One, 2000. This is important. 3 years before my being arrested and wrongfully convicted, there was two former disgraced New York City detectives who were doing hits for the mafia from the 80s, from the late 70s to the 80s and 90s, and what some turncoat, some would you say a truthful man, but a rat, basically came forward and ratted them out. They were in retirement. The New York City newspapers went crazy. Mafia police, they were cuffed. They had the walk of shame, the perp walk all over the town. Me, when I broke up with her that night, and now the next morning, I get a call that night from the guy Jerry White, the neighborhood cop. She goes ahead to call me. I don't accept her calls. She goes back to the 114 precinct with cigarette burns, bruises. Now she knew I was constantly at a studio that had cameras, always in and out of a bank, always around cameras, around people. So she didn't want to lie and say, this happened this morning. Not knowing if I'm actually at the 114 precinct disputing a parking ticket or at a bank where there's a camera. So she went back to the precinct on July 30th and said, look what he did to me. Look at these cigarette burns. Look at these bruises. This happened last night. The officers on duty said, Miss, one of them, an officer Carrington, I forget her first name. She's the one that typed the original police complaint when she left my home. She checked her up and down. You're picking her from domestic violence. She didn't have a mark on her. So she said, Miss, when did he do this? I checked you out last night. You have none of those burns on your bruises. Get out of here. She goes to her uncle, who I believe worked at the 106 precinct, the detective. He calls the 114 precinct. They tell him, we're not going to go arrest him for that because she didn't have those marks on her last night. She tells the uncle that I'm Gambino crime family, okay, and that they're on my payroll, and Detective Adam Ramos, Jerry White, who confirmed this, Sergeant Justin Scanlon of Internal Affairs Bureau. So he came to visit me in the feds in 2008. I was in custody from 05 to 2023 November. I got taken from state custody to federal custody in MDC in 2008. And I was bunking, like I said earlier, with Mikey the Butcher Vitruso. He's in John Gotti Jr.'s book. He was my bunkie in the fest. But the bottom line, she makes this allegation that those cops, Detective Adam Ramos, Organized Crime Task Force, and Officer Jerry White are on my payroll, as is Officer Michael Tice. So Internal Affairs Bureau, this is why they're not. So detective, her uncle, the detective, called IAB. It's not a regular civilian making this allegation. It's a detective. Calls Internal Affairs Bureau, says, look, my niece was kidnapped, raped, and tortured with a cigarette. He's believing it. This is what she told him.
How can they believe? I mean, dude, those type of how can somebody just make those charges up and say you work for the gang? I mean, what's the ties? They gotta have. I mean, that's like you work for the cartel. I mean, how can
Can
you?
I say something? And with respect, I don't mean to interrupt, Big Herc. If you grew up in Southside Jamaica, Queens, I'm not digressing. If you grew up there in the 80s and 90s and you even shook Fat Cat's hands once, Pappy Mason's hands once, you bopped like this one time with Supreme McGriff. Shout out Baby Born. BB, that's Supreme Mr. McGriff's younger brother and a friend of mine. If you did that once with them and they took a picture of that, you're an associate. You're part of that. They can indict you. That's the way they were giving it up if you're at a high
I
end.
think some of the stuff that happened here is that, and I mean, Joel gets very, very animated about it. But I mean, from my take on the file that I read, is that she had a relative that was a police officer. She went to the relative, and the relative called in a favor and made these injuries. They ultimately, when he goes to trial, these injuries they claim happened the night when the police were there, and it was never really addressed in trial that the police that were at the scene didn't see these injuries. Correct?
No, in my
Okay,
can
if
I
I
ask you,
may.
but I'm just curious because I mean I'm listening to a story, but even if now this guy's gonna under the penalty of perjury support her allegations and risk his job for her saying this, but what is the gain? I mean, it has to be something. What is the gain from telling this hell of a story unless you're going to get a $500,000? I mean, why would you risk lying and doing all
Okay,
this stuff?
It's actually not a big lie. It's a favor. Back in those days, a police officer could call another police officer. Say, listen, this is what
calling
she
a
said
favor.
happened. And you got to remember, he's saying this is what she said happened. It's actually the job of the defense and the district attorney's office to vet all this out before you go to trial. But the district attorney's office, and this is also going on today, they want to win. They don't care about the truth. So once they had the arrest made, and you had the police officer saying this is what we got, they're just trying to defend their case to win.
Mm-hmm.
This happens a lot. It happened worse back in the 90s when crime rates were through the roof and they needed to get convictions, and that's where innocent people do go to jail because there was this camaraderie. There was this
common practice.
not common practice. The police and the district attorney's office were a little too comfortable giving when you had to deal with cases and having to get evidence. And, the district attorney's office is to get to the truth. But in back in the day, in those days, they were looking for convictions. That's how you kept yourself in office. So it wasn't, well, was this what happened, or was this a conviction? No, we need the conviction.